You know, a lot of people have got a lot to say about the stuff we do, subject matter, Democrats, Republicans, Constitution, change, uproar. Phoned home at the weekend, asked my mum, what do you think of the podcast? She said, it looks like you're enjoying yourself. Hello and welcome to day 24 of Trump 100 with me, James Matthews.
And me, Mark Stone.
Coming up, we'll be joined by our numbers guy, data and economics editor Ed Conway. We'll get the expert view on Trump tariffs.
And surely we certainly need that. But first, the big foreign policy challenge for Donald Trump is Gaza and the Middle East. After Monday night's ultimatum set by the president to Hamas, release the hostages or else, well, a day later, and Jordan's King Abdullah met Mr. Trump here in D.C.
Mark, you're just back from the White House.
Cold.
Braving the snow. You've been there all day covering King Abdullah of Jordan's visit.
Yeah, and we had been, we knew this was coming, and it came off the back of Benjamin Netanyahu's visit last week. There were bells and whistles for Netanyahu's trip and a guard of honor, and we wondered if the same would be the case for King Abdullah. And so it was, the same procedure as he drove in. And I think that was the first surprise. Apart from the height difference between the two of them, I'd never realized that. But I mean, Donald Trump is a tall man. King Abdullah is probably my height, not so tall. So the height difference was clearly in Donald Trump's favor, towering above the king outside the West Wing. But that was the last we thought we'd see of them because we'd been told the previous evening there would be no on-camera press conference, nothing. But of course, everything changed.
Yeah, it tends to work that way, doesn't it? It's all a bit on the hoof in terms of media access at the White House.
It is. Everything's changing at the last minute. And the way it works, so people understand, because it is kind of interesting, is that there is a group of photographers and journalists who are on a rota to be the pool that day. And pool means that they are then providing the words and the pictures for the rest of us, because obviously we can't all fit in the Oval Office. And so the pool team were called in at the last minute, and then, of course, began an impromptu news conference, which for the king, I think, was pretty awkward, because he wasn't expecting to be conducting diplomacy publicly, live, in the way that he was. And it was fascinating.
Yeah, and of course the big question was Donald Trump saying to Egypt and indeed to Jordan that he wanted those countries to take in more Palestinian refugees, the big elephant in the room.
The Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years, because I've been watching this for so many years. It's nothing but trouble.
Donald Trump double down again. Yes, that is what he wants. Yes, they should all leave Gaza. I mean, it was precisely what all Arab countries do not want at all. Yeah. And yet, the first words pretty much to come from the king's mouth were these.
Mr. President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
Gushing praise from an ally.
Yeah, gushing praise from the king to the president who wants to undermine everything that king believes in terms of what's about to happen in his backyard. Remarkable, you might say, but then it is just another example of another country realizing how much they need Trump's America and how bad it would be to upset Donald Trump. In a way, it was a kind of diplomatic foreplay, if I could say that, a sort of duplicity of diplomacy to keep people on side, to give off as much praise as you can. But the subtext of what the king was saying was, look, Mr. President, we think your idea is terrible. It's not going to work. It's not going to go down well across the Arab world. But we love you, Mr. President, because we need you. So I'll say all these things. And then quietly, although unfortunately the cameras are rolling, I want to tell you it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it was almost gentle guidance in that room from the veteran to the rookie in terms of Middle Eastern affairs.
Yeah, it was. I'd love to have known what was going through the king's head as he was kind of being forced into this public moment. What I did think was interesting was that the king did come armed with an offer. He said, look, we will take in Gazan children, the most injured, the most ill. We will bring them to Jordan and we will help them. The president seemed to love that. It was a new idea he hadn't heard before. It was 2,000 is not the 2 million that the president is calling for, but the president latched onto it
threw him a bone, didn't he? Didn't
Yeah.
there wasn't going to be any public humiliation in the context of that meeting, but in the mind of King Abdullah, I suppose, was what he was going to put on social media after the event.
And he did. He basically laid out what he didn't say in the White House, which was the Arab position. We will not be part of any forced or voluntary removal of Palestinians from Gaza, and we believe the only solution is the two-state solution, Israel, Palestine living alongside each other. It was notable that Abdullah also made the point that we in the Middle East have our own ideas, and we want you, Mr. President, to be part of those, and that we have been invited by Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, for discussions there.
We have to keep in mind that there is a plan from Egypt and the Arab countries. We're being invited by Mohammed bin Salman to discussions in Riyadh. I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? Right. And obviously, we have to look at the best interests of the United States, of the people in the region, especially to my people of Jordan.
So I think Saudi Arabia, its money will be key. It'll be key to winning over Trump and allowing him to climb down maybe from his controversial Gaza plan. It will be key to a rapprochement with Israel maybe, and key maybe to rebuilding Gaza. All roads, I think, are leading to Riyadh at the moment.
And Mark, we were expecting Trump to be signing some more executive orders this afternoon.
We were delayed a little bit. Again, the White House initially said that they would be signed behind closed doors, no cameras, and then at the last minute, it's announced that it indeed will be filmed. And then we spotted Elon Musk heading into the West Wing. I was stuck still doing Gaza. James, you watched it from here.
Yeah, well, I have to say, the most awkward news conference starring the most awkward man. You had Trump sat at the Resolute desk, stood beside him, Elon Musk. He brought in his son, picking his nose at one point. And, this was, I think this was Trump introducing Elon Musk to deliver an accountability. There have been many questions and much secrecy surrounding his work. I think this was a presentation of Musk before this group of media to say, well, go and ask him what you like. And, what we got was not detail. I mean, it was a news conference, a Q&A. And we had Elon Musk speaking as he does, I suppose, in slogans, the way you see him on X at 3, 4 in the morning.
Competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be scrutinized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized nonstop.
He's not massively articulate.
No.
With respect, Mr. Musk.
Yeah, he's awkward. He was giving us a flavour of what his job was, but short on, I think, the accountability that the American public are after, certainly in Congress they are after, from an individual who is launching a full-scale assault on the federal government.
There was one interesting moment that I've just read about now, actually, that you probably saw. We've talked about this on the podcast before, the condoms to Gaza stuff that turned out was nonsense. $50 million worth of condoms going to Gaza, so said Caroline Levitt, the press secretary. Turned out very quickly not true. In fact, they were going to the Gaza region of Mozambique as part of a very worthy and important fight to help HIV. Musk was asked about this. Why have you been making stuff up?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes.
We all make mistakes, effectively. So contrition.
Contrition of sorts, yeah. But it's a big mistake. I mean, when you are short on credibility in the eyes of many people, when you are the man who's been sent in to sort out the facts, the figures, and to nail down the detail, that's not the mistake you want to be making publicly.
But also, to apply this to his own platform, we all know that the original tweet, which may not be true, gets millions of retweets. The follow-up, the correction that may well come on whatever subject it is, gets about 4 retweets. So it's the initial seed that's sown. And I think on the condom story, many people will have heard the original claim and still believe that.
Yeah, I suppose I was going to say something.
You're going to make some condom gag now.
Well, people want protections in place. and they want
James.
to be assured that they can trust the protector in chief.
Anyway, we promised you Ed Conway earlier on. We caught up with him because we need to talk about trade, don't we?
Yeah, with all that was going on in the White House, countries around the world are scrambling to gauge the impact of Trump's latest tariffs. 25% on steel and aluminium, signed yesterday, this executive order due to take effect on the 12th of March.
I spotted Peter Navarro, who is Donald Trump's trade man, or one of his trade men dealing with manufacturing and all the rest of it. He was outside the White House. He'd popped out of the Oval Office, out of the West Wing, and we caught up with him for a few words. I asked him about Britain deciding not to place retaliatory tariffs against the US.
We love the UK, and if you're telling me that they have announced they won't retaliate, that's the most sensible response to this, because all we're doing in America here is defending ourselves against this unfair dumping and government subsidization.
Earlier in the day, we decided to recruit some help to try to make sense of all this. We picked the brain of no less than the mighty Ed Conway, our own economics and data editor. Ed, you're the kid in class whose homework we all copy. How are you doing?
I'm baffled by everything every day. Maybe even more than you guys.
Well, if you're baffled, that scares us all. We've been reading your thread on X, which, great stuff. Let me start where you finished that thread. You wrote, "We're way beyond rationality here." What did you mean?
I think if you were being rational, you probably wouldn't do a lot of this stuff because it's going to be quite disruptive for a lot of, for American manufacturers. I mean, the point behind all of these tariffs is basically he wants to bring back a lot of production to America. So this is one of the tools you use to do that. But they're such blunt tools he's doing that in the short run, it's almost certainly going to push up prices quite a lot for a lot of American businesses. I mean, aluminium, you need it to make planes. So for Boeing, this is pretty disastrous. You need it to make, electric vehicles. So for the car industry, it's pretty disastrous. And steel, you need to make basically everything. So you're pushing up the cost of doing all that stuff in the short run with the hope that further down the road, you can encourage people to kind of build plants. But it's going to take a long time for that kind of thing.
That was what struck me, Ed. Trump is framing this as making America great again. If you're a layman, you don't really understand the intricacies as you do. It kind of could make sense. Well, obviously, you want steel and aluminium to be made in America because that's going to do great things for jobs. It's going to bring everything back home again. But as you point out, it takes an awfully long time to recreate an industry that has died in places like Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt. It takes time, right?
It does. You kind of salute the ambition, okay? Because and here, in the UK here, we have deindustrialized. We've deindustrialized really quickly. We've only got one aluminium plant left. America's got, I think, 2 or 3 that are running at the moment, and essentially a lot of this is trying to reclaim that industrial past. I think the question, and the interesting question, is, are American consumers going to welcome that, given that they are going to see higher prices as a result of this, which they will, because the price of everything basically goes up.
You're in no doubt about that. Everything's going to go up.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty irresistible. If you're putting up the price of all aluminium coming into the country, and America depends on aluminium coming from overseas. If you're putting up that price by 25%, then that goes up in price by 25%. Maybe if you're a producer, you can kind of absorb some of it, but some of that is almost certainly going to be passed on to consumers. And that's kind of what happened last time around, because these tariffs are basically a reprise of what happened in 2018. But the difference is twofold. First of all of the exemptions that there were last time around, and the UK got an exemption, all of those exemptions have gone. And secondly, the aluminium tariff last time around was 10%. This time is 25%. And I know that just seems like, whatever, it's a tariff, it's not great. But for that business, which, like I say, is cutting edge stuff, it's aerospace, it's making electric vehicles, for that whole sector, the difference between 10 and 25 is massive. So I think it would be crazy if this wasn't eventually passed on to consumers in the short run. But they know this, they know this in the Commerce Department. They know this because they did this last time around. And I guess they're kind of ready for the tough experience in the first few years, but the hope that, within 4 years, then you're starting to see the payback. But it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Yeah, Ed, from a UK perspective, what's in the mind, you think, of the Prime Minister?
I think Oh gosh, I mean, like, I think this is an enormous challenge. I think for the UK, we still export quite a lot of steel. A lot of people think we don't make stuff anymore. We actually send about 400 million pounds worth of exports, steel exports to the US, about 300 million pounds worth of aluminium. And so it is going to affect us. It's going to affect our businesses.
It seems to be the case, Ed, that the UK, at the moment at least, has decided not to respond and put tariffs on America as a consequence of this retaliation. You can understand why they're doing that?
I can understand why, because they don't yet. They're still trying to suss it out. They don't know how to negotiate. And right now, Peter Mandelson has just started. You don't want to upset Donald Trump. There's a calculation here about how many jobs are you talking about? How much of an impact is there? How dispensable is it? How much of this will be kind of recouped if you get a trade deal, right? People I talk to say that there are people in the White House who think they could get a trade deal with the UK. It may not be a very extensive one, but they think it could get a trade deal with the UK in a matter of months. I know that may just be talk, but these conversations are ongoing. So I think there is a bit of kind of calculating going on right now. But I think, to be honest with you, also, the Treasury is not really set up for this. The institutions here are not used to dealing with a trade war, and that's what we're in right now. Like it or not, we used to get the EU to deal with this stuff. Now we have to deal with it ourselves, and we have no institutional experience of it. So I'm a bit nervous about that.
Okay, Ed Conway, thanks very much for joining us. He loves a graph, that man.
I love a chart. Love a chart.
Okay, Mark, what else has been going on today?
Well, Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, is going to Ukraine. He will be the first member of Trump's administration to go, ostensibly to discuss a deal to buy Ukrainian minerals. So I think that's very interesting indeed. Maybe some sort of financial deal could be done with Ukraine that could clearly form part of the contours of a peace deal that Trump wants to bring in. Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, he's been pumping iron. Have you seen this, James?
I have not, actually. Tell me about it.
Well, he's in Germany ahead of the Munich Security Conference, and he's released pictures on his X account of him working out with the US Marines based out there. The post said, "Strength equals readiness."
Every inch the Fox News presenter, even when he's Defense Secretary.
Exactly, and a former veteran as well, so he knows how to work out. Maybe, yeah. Finally, this is interesting. A journalist for the Associated Press was kicked out of the White House today, refused entry to the Oval Office event we were just discussing, because his organization, the Associated Press, was still referring to the newly named Gulf of America as the Gulf of Mexico.
And Stephen Chung, Trump's spokesperson, replied with a mini violin emoji.
Yeah. I mean, incidentally, the Associated Press, they have a sort of, they conform to standards which we all kind of lock into. Yeah. The Associated Press is seen as the titan in terms of newswire services. And their view is that if there is a disputed geographical name, they will always use both. And they, depending on the context, they will use one or the other. But they won't simply conform to one and not the other. And that is the case with Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, but the White House didn't like it, and they have actually refused access, at least for this one news conference.
Yeah, quite honest, raises questions of press freedom. Not the biggest question, perhaps, but a serious question nonetheless, particularly given the current political environment we're in right now.
Yeah, watch your back, James.
You and me both. Okay, that's it for today. As always, please do follow the podcast wherever you're listening, or you can watch us on YouTube as well.
And as always, remember to email us trump100@sky.uk. Sunday is the day when we try and answer as many of those questions as we can.
That's it for day 24 of Trump 100. We'll be back tomorrow for day 25.
See you then.